Kimber, for those that haven't come across you online, introduce yourself and tell our listeners what we're talking about today.
I'm Kimber Boothe. I serve as a strategic pharmacy consultant and career coach to advance pharmacy practice and help pharmacists have joyful, engaging careers. Today, we're going to talk about intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship. So some people may wonder what those terms are. Obviously, I think we're familiar with entrepreneurship, having that entrepreneurial spirit where we own our own business, we're creating our own path. Intrapreneurship is related to that, but it's the opportunity to be innovative and entrepreneurial within an organization, which at the end of the day, many of us do practice or work within the confines of an organization. So how can we advance practice both intrapreneurial or through entrepreneurial efforts?
That's cool, the intrapreneurship.
Intrapreneurship is actually a published term. It's in the dictionaries. Some people call it an entrepreneur on the job. It's an entrepreneur at work. Many of us have these ideas, but going off and starting your own business, whether it's a small single person or you have these big dreams of a big business, sometimes you have the safety net of being in an organization that can support that innovation. There's the safety of doing it within an organization that comes with funding sources, the legal structure is there, you have a guaranteed paycheck still, that aren't always there when you're starting a side hustle or trying to start a business.
It almost sounds like there's no downside of safety. Well, I can see two downsides. If it's ultra successful, you maybe don't get the upside of your entrepreneurial endeavors, number one. And then I suppose, separate from the money, they might get extra time or at least flexible time. So those are the two things that maybe you trade for not having a safety net, but a safety net's really good sometimes.
Honestly, what I do, my main part of my consulting business is stuff that I did as an intrapreneur.
Do you feel like you, in general, like the personalities of people that have this entrepreneurial spirit, or sometimes are they a narcissistic pain in the ass?
Luckily, I have not noticed that narcissistic pain in the ass personality. I have dealt with them, but actually they have not been pharmacists in my career path that had that personality. I love that spirit. So I will say that this kind of bold attitude, again, whether you're an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur, I like to say that I like people who are strategic about their life and career. So most people that are these entrepreneurs or people who seek me because they want to advance practice, they want to, have a better career, all of their mindset, I seem to attract these type of people who are positive about the profession, who want to give back, and it's okay to want to make money doing it.
Devil's advocate. Intrapreneurship. They go to their boss in the pharmacy world and they say, I've got this spirit. And as you were saying, you want to get paid sometimes for that. But devil's advocate, if I'm a boss, I'd say, just get to work. That's what you're paid for. I didn't get you in here just because of your skills. I hired you amongst another 30 different people because I saw more potential in you to do your stuff. So how do you tell people that want to do the intrapreneurship, how do you prepare them just to maybe get slapped by their company that says, you're supposed to be doing this?
Well, and that definitely can happen. And sometimes it's the individual manager who is not thinking broad enough.
Right.
Or, they're very narrow-minded, got blinders on, get the widgets done. And they're not open to that. I think that's why, teaching about how to support innovation in your department is important. So how do you, when your employees has an idea and comes to you, how do you embrace it and support them and provide them the resources or time or space to explore it further and not squash it? But there are definitely narrow-minded managers out there, and it's important to think about how do you manage up and identify who your stakeholders are when you have an idea. And it can be small. For example, a pharmacist that I worked with, she started a technician training program. So she identified a need. While there were some initial barriers to it, she put together a detailed summary plan, which covered the key points and the return on investment, the ROI, and it got presented. Her boss presented it to senior leadership, and it got approved so they could get internal resources to address their technician training and turnover issues that they were having. Definitely put together a business plan. You'd want to do some of the work for that person. Time is the most precious resource. Like, we don't have time right now, but if you can prepare a summary that then your boss can present that has some of these thoughts in it, you don't want to be talking to other leaders when you're trying to identify a plan. You definitely want to loop your boss in earlier, but putting something on paper that has an outline of your proposal, the benefits, and the return on investment is what you want to put together to help the process.
See, here's the thing, though, when dealing with the boss, is we bosses, well, I record this at home, and I can't say that too loud because my wife and my daughters might think I'm talking about being a boss here, which I'm obviously not. But at work, I'm the boss. But we bosses love to think the ideas are ours. When you bring something to the boss, you can't make it too refined, or else they're afraid that they're going to show it to their boss and it's going to be, well, here's Kimber's plan and it's going to go through it. So you have to leave enough for the boss to put their imprint on it.
I do agree with that. And that's why you want to go to them earlier in the process. You've identified it, you have kind of an outline, but you haven't, it's not a fully fleshed out, business plan at that point to include them. And then hopefully they will be supportive of you, or, maybe they have to point you in the right direction.
If a pharmacist is your boss, what are some traits that they're probably a pharmacist because of some of these traits, but then it makes them a crappy boss, if they're a crappy boss?
I love how you ask these, very poignant questions. So I do think some of the type A, detail-oriented micromanaging aspects of a pharmacist make it hard as a leader, especially an actual leader, not just like a supervisor.
Why? Why is that type A bad?
You want to, when you move up in leadership, it's more about allowing your people to do what they're best at and you not micromanaging them. And that's hard. I don't want to say struggle with it, but it's a transition, and it is a lot more about empowering them. And, you have to be pretty strong in yourself to be confident that as the leader, you've brought this team together. That's your success, right? Like, you hired the right people, you allowed them to develop, you supported and inspired them towards this greater mission and vision. And then you kind of got to step out of the way,
right,
and let them do what they're good at. And you need to be comfortable with the fact that they're going to come up with these good ideas, and it's your job to move it along through the process and remove any barriers so that it can be implemented.
I think it's obvious to me, why pharmacy attracts type A. Is it that obvious? So it's because medicine's black and white and you have to be organized and all that kind of stuff. That's why it attracts these people.
It just requires a large attention to detail, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of you have to be on, when you're a practicing pharmacist, and admittedly, I haven't been a practicing pharmacist in a while. It just requires a lot of attention that I think people in other professions don't have. That your work is not so critical in terms of a patient's life is in your hands if you make a mistake. So that's how I think about it. But, I don't know actually if a study's been done about the breakdown of personality traits in our profession. I'm sure it exists, and I would suspect it would be very much towards that type A controlling personality.
I don't think I like a lot of pharmacists.
Why do you say that, Mike?
And I don't mean to paint a rosy picture on the world. They're just not happy-go-lucky. And I see a lot of times that as pharmacists, we're pushed around a lot by PBMs and our managers and the wholesalers and all that stuff. And you lose a lot of your individuality.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit cliche, but you've heard about it where some pharmacists take that frustration and they become like C2 Nazis, or you know what I mean? It's like they grab onto any power they might have and then they just beat it to death, with too much control on areas that don't need that much control. I don't know. Somebody would say, Mike, if you don't like all the pharmacists, it's obviously you. You're the one. I mean, you know that, Kimber.
Yeah.
If you're mad at everybody in your house or something, the problem's with you.
It's usually you. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because people aren't doing, in general, most people are not doing things to make you upset on purpose. And, so a lot of it is how we react to the situation. And what you're saying, though, does resonate, and it does remind me of some of the training I've done with about joy in work. And, it all relates to kind of burnout and resilience. And the Institute for Healthcare Improvement came up with this term, of saying we need to find our joy in work again. And we need to expect and, know that our day is going to be stressful. Know that, healthcare is hard. But if we put ourselves in the right mindset and we step back and remember why we got into this profession and all the amazing and wonderful things we get to do, that mindset of, yeah, this is a privilege to get to help patients. So what you're saying in terms of people getting stuck on certain things, and I do think there's an element that is causing people to want that power in terms of when you think about what causes people to feel engaged at work. They want to feel in control of something. And when we're like losing control of so many things, I think that's somewhat natural.
Yeah.
But I also feel like we've lost some of the joy in work. And that's definitely a passion of mine, is to try and see, one, of course, how we can make sure we have the right resources, right? I do think that in many practice settings, we are under-resourced, both in terms of people and technology, that is causing unneeded stress for a pretty high risk, activities that we are involved with.
When you think of somebody not joyful at work, people would say, oh, they're not joyful. That means they're sad. They think that's the opposite of not joyful. But you alluded to it there, Kimber. What are some other signs that you would feel would be opposite of joy? If it's not just sadness, would it be control? Would it be that kind of stuff?
In terms of, words that come to my mind, it's definitely a more negative, negative thoughts, negative mindset.
Negative, not maybe sadness, but negative.
Yeah, exactly. That negativity. And I know I tend to be very much an optimist and a positive person, but it's easy sometimes to let that negativity slip in. And I know you've talked in your podcast, that blaming others, so you're powerless in a way because of all of this stuff happening, to you, that you're feeling, negative. And again, yeah, it's not as much sad as it is negativity. And then you lose some of the lightheartedness that should come from work. Which is a release during the day too. Exactly. And we're all people, our patients, our colleagues, we're all people. And it is important that we interact, as people first, and then as the whatever healthcare entity relationship we're in, doctor, pharmacist, patient, pharmacist, et cetera. How do we interact there? But we're still people. And so connecting with them on a personal, actual level, and then taking care of the business at hand, which is, the patient care that needs to happen.
Just taking some time to be human for a little bit and sharing a smile among the stress and so on is probably a big thing.
Yeah, well, and I know that I've used music a lot with my departments and teams, whether, if it's a team meeting, I like to introduce music. I like to have, oftentimes my teams, we've picked out a theme song for the year or for our team. So I often try to introduce music into those kind of situations, which you're right, like throughout the day, maybe you can't play that, but that's where you need breaks to introduce some of that, maybe a little dancing, move your body a little bit. I think that's a fun thing to incorporate. But absolutely, I'm pleased to see, but saddened that it's taken so long to get some of our chain pharmacies to implement breaks. Because I think that's so necessary. When you look at all the reading about resilience, is you need some of that downtime, whether you're going to go meditate and whatever that means to you, or you just need your mind needs a break. I think it's important for safety as well as your overall well-being.
Kimber, do you listen to music when you work? I know you weren't talking about this, but do you listen to music?
Yes, I do. Almost always listen to music while I work. I try to balance like some of my other activities. I do listen to podcasts a lot, like when I'm, cleaning the house or something like that, or driving.
People listen to mine right after they take a cup of melatonin at night.
To go to sleep.
I know the truth.
No. But yeah, I love music. I've been listening to BTS lately. Actually, it's a pop band, so it's very upbeat type music, and that's been my background go-to.
My dad, years ago at our pharmacy, he must have had a sales guy or something come in that talked about having music on for shoppers, and I think there had to be something financial to it, like people are more relaxed and they shop more and stuff. So he got these couple speakers, and I think the guy sold them on that you could go to Alcatraz if you were playing the radio, and without giving credit to the players and so on. So he bought into this music service. And back then, my dad was a different generation. Now the generations are closer because of TikTok and all that stuff and social. So my dad gets this music in, and it's kind of elevator music. And one, I hated the elevator music, but two, I just couldn't concentrate. So he wanted this done, and he'd come in and the music would be off, and he'd come in and turn the music on, and he'd turn it on a little bit louder to like make up for the time that it wasn't on. And, and then he'd play this damn elevator music, and then he'd leave and I would turn it off again. So Kimber, you wrote a book or two.
So I have one book published at the end of last year, another one coming out now here in 22. Where I started with the book was my Pharmavation book. So pharmacy innovation, I had created a course to pull together some of this intrapreneurship that I had learned through the years, and wanted to make sure that I packaged it in a way to allow it to impact more people. There's only so many people I can coach one-on-one or consult with, but how can I get this message out? So a book or an online course are two ways of doing that. And great news, it looks like at least one College of Pharmacy may be using it for their practice advancement course, which is thrilling. I know that people have been giving it to their students, and I just want to see how it can inspire bold innovation for practice. So I started with Pharmavation, and it's, well, I know you can probably see me, but not your listeners, but it's about advocating for resources, advancing pharmacy practice, and accelerating your pharmacy career.
Well, Kimber, you're holding that up, and that's a hardcover.
Yes, and it's very colorful. Lots of pictures.
Wait a minute. Talking about pictures, I think it has a centerfold.
There's, me on the back.
You're on the back. That's the back. All right. So with hardcover, your plan from the start would have been, that's a school book, right?
Well, we're offering it both. I have softcover, hardcover, Kindle, and it's being recorded as an Audible right now. So
But was that your thought of hardcover, that it would be more school, or do people still like hardcover business books, even the general population?
yeah, actually, it's interesting because people can buy both from me. And I will say that the initial purchase, so maybe people in my community, was definitely a lot more on the hardcover. But the hardcover is like $10 more just because it's cost more to print, the hardcover. So now it's probably a little more balanced to the soft cover. And, I tend to buy a lot of books on Kindle or Audible myself.
Wait a minute, though. Did the hardcover come out first?
The hard and soft came out together at the same time.
And hard was higher.
Yes. Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Most people might not be as cheap as I am.
Yeah, like why spend the extra money on it?
Right.
Yeah, it does feel good. We have thought about that, but I didn't create it specifically for pharmacy courses, but it was something that I brainstormed with my book publisher about, like how could I create a supplemental, teacher's guide that goes along with it to allow it to truly be used in a course. I teach at the University of Cincinnati right now. I've definitely been faculty in other areas, but I teach in the Master's in Pharmacy Leadership program on financial management. But this is a potential book for, business courses, that exists in pharmacy schools, either at the, PharmD level or a master's level, or it can also be, part of that somehow type of practice advancement or innovation. So we're actually talking about, if schools do want to use it, because again, there's these downloadable tools that can be used.
How do you get word out to the schools? Obviously, there's a lot of ways to do it, but how do you think that you would get that serious word out that you'd like business classes or whatever to adopt it?
Yeah, it's definitely something, I need to plan for. I, want to reach out to the schools anyways, because I wanted to offer to speak to the students. I've spoken at some pharmacy schools at practice advancement, and I just want to share this message of hope for our profession that I do see, and I mentor several students in schools, and I'm very excited about the future of pharmacy, and I want to make sure they're hearing some of that optimism. Again, back to our topic today, for intrapreneurship to advance. Things don't have to stay the way they are. They can improve, or whether they do want to consider entrepreneurship. When I think about my business, I have kind of three main topic areas that I'm supporting. It started with this kind of connector leadership topic. That is where I started as my career coaching that I started with, like actually 7-8 years ago when I first started my side hustle. And it did evolve to focus on pharmacy with some of the great experiences I've had with being able to advocate now for over 250 positions in hospitals and health systems. So that's why Pharmivation became the first book. But in terms of my three paths, it is this connector leadership. How can you grow your career? How can you be an effective leader where you're not that micromanaging manager? You want to be that bolder, optimistic, supportive leader to get where you want. So that's my connector line of support.
That verb, connector, who are you connecting?
Well, I like to say that I'm helping pharmacy leaders to connect people, knowledge, and resources. So you're the connector. You're connecting the dots.
All right. We've already established that I don't like pharmacists. Okay. And they don't like me. And that's fine. That's fine. But if you can pick areas, because we like to pick on people here, if you can pick areas between pharmacists with patients and pharmacists with each other and pharmacists with family and pharmacists with community and so on. We talked about pharmacists being type A, and some of those things. Do you think pharmacists, compared to other professions, maybe don't connect those dots as well? Is there something about being type A? And you think of some professions like a real estate agent or, a salesperson or something. They're born to make those connections. Do you think pharmacists have trouble with that?
Yeah, when you say it that way and you put it that way, I do think some aspects of it we are definitely more challenged with, for sure. But I do find that this is kind of a challenge with a lot of people, that we're not,
in general.
Yeah, we're not being strategic about our life. So a lot of people can be strategic about their careers, but what I've found, unfortunately, with pharmacy is it kind of stops like after you finish school. It feels
Mm-hmm.
like you spent all that time, all that money in school. And then, I ask groups of pharmacists and I'll ask big rooms and I'll say, how many people here have a career development plan? How many people set annual goals? And like one person in a room might raise their hand. So
Really?
it's surprising to me, yes, that while some of the things I would have expected that because we've spent and invested so much in our careers that would continue, but it's almost like we shut down in a way afterwards.
We talk about, I don't talk about it, but people talk about, the PGY, all these different extensions and all this stuff.
Yes.
It always seems like pharmacists are making these plans, but when I hear people, maybe it stops kind of at like, okay, I got this job. And as I contemplate on it, it's like not a lot of people maybe talk past that point. And if they do, I don't talk to a lot of them, but I hear it more in terms of maybe their career for a few more years, but I don't hear too much yearly goals as you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know that I've studied it, but some of what I've read and definitely working with a lot of clients across the country, there's, again, some of it's just an exasperation, like they don't have time, and they're just, trying to balance everything else, but they're just not being as thoughtful about it. And to me, it doesn't require a residency. Residency is nice because it's just a fast track, right? You get a lot of focused training in those years, but there's other ways to develop yourself by networking with other people, by continuing to read, listening to podcasts that will prepare you for those positions. And it could be that you want a clinical position, or maybe you even want a leadership role, right? You want to move into leadership. Maybe you can do some project management training. Do you understand the finances and the business of what we're in?
You bring up leadership. Being a leader is kind of a pain in the ass. I mean, you make more money usually. Maybe you can hide a little bit more. You can pretend like you're working on something sitting at your desk. And some people, I guess, just have that goal of leadership. Sometimes it comes and goes for me.
Mm-hmm.
You get a little bit of George Washington in you, something like that. But leadership, you just get a lot of complainers. And the people that are complaining, they like that lot in life. They don't want to go anywhere. They're just professional complainers underneath you.
It is sometimes a thankless job for sure. And you do have people who will think that you have bad intentions, even though you're trying to do everything you can to balance whatever the competing priorities and challenges that are coming at you. But that may not always be, recognized. And not everybody has to be a leader. So,
right.
Definitely, we don't have, everybody couldn't be a leader. But I do also focus a lot on, something that I think Sarah White in our profession and it's definitely, outside of our profession talks about the big L and the little L. Right. So, yeah, you can definitely have that big L title where you're the official leader, meaning people report to you, the buck stops there, et cetera. But there's also the little L's that I think sometimes and to me, that's part of that intrapreneurship. Like, how do we make sure that everybody realizes that they are their own leader? They're leading their own life, their career, and they're impacting people around them. So it's important that everybody looks at themselves as that. And I remember one time when I was working in the pharmaceutical industry, and one of the values that we had to talk about was leadership. And some of the staff didn't think they had to actually even respond to that in their performance review because they weren't a manager or in management. And I said, of course you do. Leadership is not just the big L title. It is leadership of yourself and in what's around you.
Most of us can and will be and maybe should be strong number twos. How many number ones are there?
Mm-hmm.
Especially as a company gets bigger, think about like Amazon, and now think about someone who's not the head of Amazon, but you've got, thousands of people underneath you. You are a leader, but you're not the leader. And even when you're the leader, then you say to yourself, well, I'm not the leader of that company. That's bigger than I am. I mean, we're all followers, but we're all leaders.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, because almost even when you're the CEO of many companies, there's probably a board that's
You
you
got
know
it. The board
that's
there.
helping to impact and decide whether you have a job or not. So, it's important that everybody looks at themselves as part of the leadership team, the success of an organization, and um, so I do think that's important that we look at it that way.
You don't own a yacht,
No.
nor do I. But can you imagine having, $100 billion and you buy this yacht and you see the Joneses next door, have a yacht that's 30% bigger? I bet those feelings of not having as much is the same feeling or worse when you have $100 billion, but you don't have the biggest yacht,
Oh, yeah.
It's all the same feeling, I bet.
It is at every level that
It's at
keeping up
every
with
level.
the Joneses.
It is.
And it's kind of a jealousy and an imposter syndrome that happens. I know I just had it recently as a pharmacist in my career, and seeing being jealous of some other pharmacy entrepreneurs who were doing
sure.
certain things that are like, oh, I should have done that, or oh, I'm not as big as them with my followers or my
Absolutely.
clients, what have you. But then you have to get back and remember, you have your unique purpose, your unique gifts. But yes, I've gone through that, and I don't doubt that it's not at every level. And some people will look to me, but like, look at you, Kimber. Like, if you're a full-time entrepreneur, more than doubled my salary, with what I'm doing, and they'll look at me and think I'm perfectly successful, but then I'm like, I'm not achieving all of my goals, and then I get this kind of jealousy. So I know it happens at every level.
All right. So Kimber, we've got the Pharmovation, which is intrapreneurship. And
Yes.
then we talk about the connectors. What's the third theme?
The third theme is Pharmfluencers, where I'm supporting pharmacy entrepreneurs through this thought leader model.
The narcissistic.
No.
What did I call him earlier? What did I call him?
Yeah, you definitely
narcissistic
used the word
what?
narcissistic.
I had another derogatory comment.
You did. Might have to listen to the recording for that.
I'm going to listen to it and edit it back in here. I'm not even sure if these thoughts are related, but I think sometimes the pharmacists, we normal folk in the trenches, however you define that, I think sometimes there is an envy of people saying that they want to do stuff. I think sometimes there is envy, but I think that some of the leaders do a good job of connecting to the people in the trenches to lift them up. And I think sometimes, I'm not saying you're people at all, but I think sometimes people can look at those people, and maybe the people have been a little bit derogatory to people that are still downtrodden, and sometimes that connection's not there. And that's why I like the intrapreneur so much, because there's a big, nice span of being a leader in your own spot. How broadly do you define entrepreneurship?
Well, I think, in terms of having that entrepreneurial spirit, I do think, anybody who's kind of that innovative, think out of the box, where your goal is to kind of create a solution to a problem. Those are some of the terms that I think of when I think about entrepreneur, mindset and behaviors. True entrepreneurship, you'd say, as my business coaches would tell me, is, you need to get to a point where you have a business that's making money. It has to go beyond a hobby. If you're truly thinking about being an entrepreneur. But it can be a side hustle, and that's what I had for many years. And it was a longer term plan to do it full time. But like I said, it blurs because of this intrapreneurship when I'm thinking about it again, because I think that's that entrepreneurial stirrup in the organization.
Let's face it, unless you have a brand, or a huge arbitrage or something that's really going to take off, the risk isn't as strong and the reward is quite often better in the entrepreneurship. Maybe not that satisfaction of doing it on your own, or maybe not some of the flexibility, but the monetary reward is quite often pretty good, unless you really hit it as an entrepreneur versus doing it already in an organization?
It's interesting you're bringing that up because sometimes from a marketing perspective, I don't want to say struggled with, but sometimes I've really thought like my fellow entrepreneurs who are promoting people to start their own business, like it's kind of like they're promoting a clear ROI. Whereas when I'm focusing on my PharmAvators, people working with organizations, when you look at their success, they may justify, $500,000 in FTEs or resources, but that may or may not go into, any of that may not go into their own pocket. And so sometimes it's harder to connect that return on investment. But that said, I definitely have, seen people who've, gotten promotions, gotten that higher paying job. And so, yes, advancing your career, even without a business, is very possible to be positively rewarding. Or just learning how to negotiate that salary. I just worked with somebody who is moving into a management position, and we were able to get her salary up $46,000, I think, from what they originally offered her, just by learning those skills of negotiation and not accepting the first offer that you're given.
Your goals are inspiring because I have a lot of selfish goals. I wouldn't even think about the other pharmacists. I would just be thinking of my life, but I'm kind of an old fart, so I have my own dreams now. But one thing I thought of is I could make a huge impact on business schools with my podcast because they could take it to all the business schools, have them listen to it on Monday, and then the next day they come to pharmacy business class, the teacher would then say, all right, do the opposite. Right? Think of the impact I would make.
Oh, Mike, you speak great things and you have some great guests on this show. But it's nice that you want to make fun of yourself.
Well, Kimber, what a pleasure meeting you.
Absolute pleasure talking to you here as well.
Like I say, there seems to be sometimes a divide. Not everybody feels this way, but stuck in the pharmacy dungeon. And then there's some people that have, broken free. They're the entrepreneurs, but it's so cool to see that nice connection between the intrapreneurship, between people who are kind of in that area. They've got leadership skills, but they're not quite there and maybe never want to go out on their own. And so it's really cool, that connection you make there. And I think that it's very practical and it touches reality, because a lot of people, that is the reality of being able to make incremental steps up that ladder of life. And I think you in that position give a lot of hope and direction for people.
Thank you for saying that. I definitely do hope to have some type of a inspirational aspect to have people think positively about our profession.
And it's good you have those goals for another 10 or 15 years before you're an old bitter person like I am, just looking out for himself.
I will try.
All right, Kimber, such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Talk to you again. Bye-bye.